But what do we mean by the term private multilateralism in the context of sustainability? Multilateralism is a term we usually use when governments come together to work on issues of particular importance. In the context of sustainability, private multilateralism is how the private sector can really lean in and cooperate together for a greater cause, for a particular purpose, such as climate change. Hello, and welcome to our Sustainability Dialogues at our HCLTech Pavilion here in Davos. We're coming to you from the 53rd annual meeting of the World Economic Forum. Over the course of the next few days, we'll be having conversations around some of the most pressing issues associated with sustainability. My name is Aoife Walsh. I'm the HCLTech Head of Marketing for Sustainability. Today, I'm joined by two experts where we're going to discuss private multilateralism and the role of the private sector in finding solutions around some of those most challenging issues with government and civil society. So I'm joined by Charlie Giancarlo, Chairman and CEO of Pure Storage, who are redefining data storage solutions. Welcome, Charlie. And Santosh Jairam, HCLTech's Head of Sustainability. So let's start by talking about private multilateralism in the context of sustainability and how private sector can really lean in a concerted way for greater good for certain issues around things like addressing the climate change. But what is required and how do we find some of those sustainable solutions, those sustainable ways of working, and in particular around operating and how we consume and how we produce better? So Charlie, if I start with you and just ask you for your view about the role of the private sector.
Yes.
And how companies can really partner with government and civil society.
Absolutely. Well, I believe that most technological revolutions actually tend to start with the private sector. After all, the private sector really represents all of us as citizens. It tends to outstrip the government sector by a large amount. And it's really where a lot of the creativity comes in. Government's necessary to be able to standardize and regulate industries, especially once they become mature. But in the early phases, it takes a lot of entrepreneurialism and a lot of new thinking and trial and error to really move things along. In today's environment, when we see a lot of the challenges that are being brought about by climate change, and of course we all contribute to climate change. We all use energy. We all, the labor saving that has taken place through the use of fossil fuels over a period of more than a century now. These are all things that we as citizens have driven. And it's up to us in many ways, and the private sector representing how we organize and coordinate to be able to start to address these matters. And I think that even what we see going on with COP and so forth really depends on the private sector initiatives, new technologies to be able to start to address these problems. And so we have to take it upon ourselves in the private sector because it's going to affect us, it's going to affect our customers, it's going to affect our children, to really take the lead in starting to address these problems.
Absolutely. You mentioned COP27, and certainly, Santosh, when we attended COP27, we perceived a real interest and a real involvement from the private sector. But your view on how the private sector can really step up?
As Charlie mentioned, in terms of the technology or in terms of the innovation or the pace at which you can move ahead things, private sector has a leverage, right? But that's not only the reason why we look at the private sector, or we talk about private multilateralism. At COP, what we saw is not just the technology and innovation, but the private sector really getting involved in the policy direction. And that's critical because there is a study which talks about the top 100 economies, and out of that, a majority are companies. So in that particular case, these companies need to be there on the table to decide or kind of charter the future policies as well. And that's what we saw at the COP27. I would say the shift or the involvement really changed around 2015. I think it was the UN Millennium Development Goals when that transformed into the Sustainable Development Goals. The Millennium Development Goals never involved the private sector. but there was an explicit call during the SDG development for the private sector to participate. I think that was the change where the world also realizes, the UN systems realize that the private sector is a key player in terms of the future of a sustainable future. So I think the private multilateralism is a movement which we are seeing. And you can also see that in terms of the collaborative way the companies are putting forward. Let's take the instance of a climate pledge, where all the companies are coming together to lead into that common goal. And it doesn't matter whether you are competitors, so everybody is kind of coming together to achieve that common goal. And that's what multilateralism is about.
Yeah.
So when the private companies come together to do that, it's private multilateralism.
Indeed, the Climate Pledge is an excellent example of initiatives like that. Charlie, would you give us some examples of initiatives that you're aware of or work that you do with suppliers and consumers?
Absolutely. Well, my company, Pure Storage, as you mentioned, we really are the leaders in innovation around data storage and data management. The World Economic Forum recently published figures that said that digitization, by which they mean everything from your computer to the cloud to the internet to the video conferencing to the TV that you watch, represents about 4% of total carbon dioxide production, which is really an amazing figure, right? That's a large amount of the energy we use is based on the modern communications platforms that we all use. If we look at large data centers, those are about 2% of all energy, of all electricity production. And about a third of that is data storage. Now, we've recently developed products that are literally 1/10 the power, space, and cooling of the majority of data storage today, which is based on hard disks. Ours are based on a semiconductor flash. It's the same thing that exists in smartphones. And we are, I'll just repeat it, 1/10 the space, that is, it's much smaller, the power, the amount of energy that is used, including cooling, and we're actually far less than 1/10 the waste product at the end of it. So if the way I define sustainability is using less resources to produce a specific result, and producing less waste at the end of that, at the end of life of that capability. Well, if that's the case, then we can reduce the amount of power used in massive data centers by roughly 20%. So it is really looking forward to how we can achieve the kind of lifestyle that we all want to have, but using far fewer resources, whether that's energy or materials and waste products, to be able to accomplish the same thing.
So we know that the solutions are out there. They certainly exist, the opportunities exist, and there's a need for real systematic change around everything that we've talked about. We know that there are things like climate change. We know that there's also energy security risks, etc. Santosh, I don't know if you've got some other examples of ways that we could address some of these things, in particular in the industry that you're in.
Charlie mentioned about the innovation in terms of the technology. So I would say technologies are there. Now, innovations can also be how you create specific use cases with that technology, right?
Yes.
That's also an innovation. And so I would say that one of the cases, I might step slightly from the energy and the emissions and maybe talk about a social side of the impact as well. So HCLTech partnered with the likes of Advantech, Intel, Radar, Visibility, and also Mexico City to put together a kind of a smart surveillance system, which is AI powered. What it did was it reduced the neighborhood, the challenges in terms of security and all those things by 40%. It also improved the perception of safety in those communities by almost 27%. So you have the technologies, but you can also innovate as to how you put the technologies to the best results as well.
Fantastic. And just in the last few moments that we have, some predictions for the future, Charlie. Can we do this? Can the private sector really step in and step up?
Well, I fundamentally believe we can. Now, I'm going to make a short-term prediction and a somewhat longer-term prediction. So the short-term prediction is I actually believe that as unfortunate as the recent energy crisis caused by the war in Ukraine, as unfortunate as that is for many of the economies around the world, but in particular in Europe, it's accelerating the focus around the reduction of energy utilization and the focus around sustainability. So whereas I would say as short as 2 years ago, customers didn't really care about how much energy their solutions required. Today, it's a fundamental part of their decision criteria. So that's a great step forward. So I think that the continuing focus around energy is going to be a positive thing for sustainability. And on a longer term basis, one of the biggest problems, I believe, in terms of enabling companies to really be able to measure and deliver to their customers an easy way to understand the sustainability of their solutions is the lack of a coherent and common measurement system across all of the companies. While it's a bit chaotic and confusing right now with a myriad of different measurement systems, but I think that'll come together over the next decade, and that by the end of the decade, we're going to see, in addition to companies producing a profit and loss and a price, we're going to see along with every one of their products, they're going to produce as well a measurement of its energy and resource intensiveness that will allow companies to, once you can measure something, you can reduce it. But you have to have a common way of measuring it. And I think that'll be done by the end of the decade.
Okay, we'll watch out for that. Certainly a lot has changed in the last couple of years in your view, and a lot more will change. Santosh, your prediction for the future?
I think my prediction for the future, or what I would like to see, is a changing role of the government. And when I say that, can the government become a catalyst? And I can give you an example in the sense that in the current scenario, when the interest rates are going up, money is becoming expensive. And with that, what happens is that the investments tend to go into defensive sectors. But we really want investments to go into real technologies that's coming out for sustainability. So there, if the government can be a catalyst to kind of channelize that, that would be something. And there is a proper reason, and as Charlie, you mentioned, that valuation of those environmental benefits and social benefits, if that can be plugged into the economics of a particular investment, then I think there is no challenge. Currently, the way in which we make the decisions is the return on investment is only looked at from a financial return on investment.
That's right.
And I think if we start looking into the overall sustainability return on investment with the proper valuation of environment and social benefits, I think the government can do that catalytic role.
Well, on that positive note, thank you both for your insights. Clearly there's a lot to do. Thank you and goodbye.